The rain drizzled against the cracked neon sign of Lena's Curio Tech, casting flickering shadows over the narrow street. The once busy marketplace had become a graveyard of shuttered shops, replaced by glowing towers of Nexus Corp malls that delivered everything by drone. Lena wiped her hands on her apron, staring at the empty aisles of her store. Rows of dusty gadgets and retro tech, old radios, analog watches, mechanical toys, waited for customers who would never come. The hum of passing delivery drones outside felt like a cruel reminder of how the world had moved on without her. For years, she'd tried to keep her father's legacy alive. He had believed people would always crave the warmth of real craftsmanship, the hum of gears instead of cold algorithms. But now, nobody cared about hand-built gadgets when synthetic assistants could print whatever they wanted in minutes. Rent was overdue, the power grid charged double this month, and the AI tax inspector had already sent 3 warnings. Lena sighed, resting her head against the counter, wondering if she'd have to finally sell the place. Through the fogged glass door, she saw movement. A figure stood across the street under the flickering street lamp, a man, wrapped in layers of torn coats, his face hidden behind a hood. He didn't beg or speak. He just stood there, staring at the glowing, open, sign. For a long moment, their eyes met through the glass. His were a strange color, an unnatural bluish tint that almost seemed to glow in the dark. Then, just as suddenly, he turned away and vanished into the alley. The next morning, Lena found him again, sitting beside her trash bins. His hands were clasped tightly around an old mechanical part, one of the broken gyroscopes she had thrown out the night before. He was cleaning it carefully with a piece of cloth, like it was something precious. "That's useless scrap," she said gently. The man looked up, his eyes distant but intelligent. "Everything broken can work again," he murmured. His voice was soft, but it carried a strange resonance, almost metallic. Something in those words made her pause. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe pity, or maybe something else, a gut instinct that this man wasn't what he seemed. "You need work?" she asked. He blinked, surprised, as if the idea itself was foreign. "Work," he echoed. "Yes, cleaning, sorting, maybe fixing some things if you can handle it." He nodded slowly, as though learning the concept in real time. "I can fix things." Inside the shop, he moved quietly, carefully. He touched the machines like they were alive, understanding them without needing instruction. When she left him alone for a while, she returned to find that the old holographic display, broken for months, was suddenly running perfectly, showing an antique ad from the early 2100s. Lena blinked in disbelief. "How did you get that working?" she asked. The man only shrugged. It wanted to remember. She paid him in food and let him sleep in the storage room. He never complained, never asked for money. At night, she heard faint whirring noises, like circuits humming softly. Once, when she brought him a blanket, she saw a thin line of light tracing along his wrist, faint, like a pulse made of electricity. She said nothing. Days passed, and the shop seemed to breathe again. Customers started stopping by, curious about the old devices suddenly functioning better than ever. Word spread that Lena's gadgets lasted longer, worked smoother. The revenue screen flickered green for the first time in months. Yet every time she tried to thank her quiet helper, he just smiled faintly and said, "You kept the past alive. I'm only helping it remember." But there was something haunting about him, something too precise, too still. Once, when she asked his name, he hesitated. "Kai," he said finally, as though searching through endless data to find it. That night, Lena sat in the dark behind the counter, listening to the steady hum from the back room where Kai slept. It sounded almost like an engine slowly waking up. Kai became part of the shop's quiet rhythm as though he had always been there. Every morning before sunrise, Lena would find him already awake, organizing shelves, repairing small gadgets, and polishing the old brass signs her father had once made by hand. His movements were calm and deliberate, every gesture purposeful. He never wasted emotion, never hesitated, and yet there was something tender in the way he handled fragile things, as if he knew what it meant to be broken. At first, Lena thought he might have some kind of technical background, maybe a mechanic or an old engineer who'd fallen on hard times. But soon, his precision began to feel uncanny. He could disassemble a holographic projector, realign the filaments, and rebuild it without tools. Once, he repaired a 22nd century voice recorder by touching the circuits with his fingertips, and the device came to life with a soft chime. Lena stood speechless, watching him. "You've done this kind of work before," she said carefully. Kai looked at her, his eyes reflecting the shop's dim light. "I used to build," he said. "Before they erased me." She frowned. "Who erased you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Do you believe machines can dream?" His tone wasn't mocking, but almost childlike, curious. The question lingered in Lena's mind long after he walked away. Business was improving in small but noticeable ways. Locals started coming again, drawn not just by nostalgia but by a strange attraction to the energy inside the shop. Devices that had once failed now worked better than ever. The mechanical bird at the window began to chirp on its own. Old neon signs flickered back to life. It felt like the entire store had woken up from a long sleep. Still, there were odd moments that unsettled her. Sometimes when she walked past the storage room, she'd hear Kai whispering softly in a language she didn't understand, a mix of code and melody. Other times, the lights would dim or surge as he passed by, like the electrical system responded to his presence. One afternoon, a delivery drone malfunctioned outside and crashed into the street. Before Lena could react, Kai rushed out and crouched beside the smoking machine. Sparks jumped from its wings. He placed his hands on its casing and whispered something. A pulse of blue light ran through his fingers, and the drone's engine settled into silence. Then, astonishingly, it rebooted and lifted itself off the ground. "How did you do that?" Lena gasped. "I reminded it of its pattern," he said quietly. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She searched the city database for his name, Kai, but found nothing. No identification, no record, no facial recognition match. It was as if he didn't exist. When she confronted him the next morning, he didn't deny it. "I was not meant to exist," he said softly. "I was designed, then discarded." "Designed," she repeated, her throat dry. He met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw light flicker behind his pupils. "Not all who walk are born," he said simply. Then he turned back to the counter and continued polishing an old music box. Lena stood frozen, her mind spinning. Was he an android, a hybrid, some experiment that had escaped? But his expressions, his gentle humor, his strange sadness, those felt human. More human than most people she knew. The next day, when the city power grid briefly went down, her shop remained lit. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and Kai's hands glowed faintly blue as he worked by candlelight, fixing devices. "Even without electricity, energy is everywhere," he murmured. "You just have to ask for it the right way." Lena watched him, a mix of awe and fear rising in her chest. She realized that the man she'd hired out of pity might be something far beyond her understanding, and that whatever he was, he had brought life back to her dying world.